The signal came from the deepest part of space, traveling for thousands of years before it reached the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. It was old, desperate, and carried with it the kind of fear that could cross the void between stars. On the crystal world of Zephyr Prime, the tall, blue-skinned aliens received the message first. Their technology was so advanced that they could decode the signal in moments. The message was simple but terrible. An entire species was dying and they needed help. The coordinates pointed to a star system on the edge of known space, where a rogue black hole was slowly eating everything in its path. High Scientist Veltar stood in the gleaming command center, watching the data flow across holographic displays. The numbers were clear and brutal. Any ship that tried to enter that system would be torn apart by gravity forces strong enough to bend space itself. The radiation levels alone would kill most known life forms in minutes. "This is impossible," Veltar said to his assistants. "No vessel in our fleet could survive those conditions. The gravitational stress would crush our hulls like paper." The Zephyrians were known across the galaxy for their incredible technology. Their ships could travel faster than light, their weapons could destroy planets, and their shields could stop almost any attack. But even they had limits. The dying star system was beyond those limits. In the crystalline halls of the Mindari Collective, beings of pure thought studied the same signal. They communicated without words, sharing ideas through mental connections that spanned light years. Their analysis was even more detailed than the Zephyrians, and their conclusion was the same. The lead mind speaker, known only as Prime Consciousness, shared its thoughts with the collective. The rescue mission would require vessels capable of operating in conditions that would destroy any known technology. The gravitational forces exceed all safety parameters. The radiation levels are beyond lethal. Even our most advanced ships would fail within hours. On the war world of Corvus, the reptilian Corvan Empire received the signal with their usual military efficiency. General Thakran, a massive warrior with scales like armor plates, studied the tactical display with cold eyes. His people had conquered half a dozen star systems through pure military might. But even they had to admit defeat in the face of such impossible odds. "Send a response," General Thakran ordered his communications officer. "Tell them we received their message. Express our regrets that no known technology can survive those conditions. Recommend they evacuate to safer systems immediately." It was a kind lie. The Corvans knew that the dying aliens had nowhere to run. The black hole was moving too fast, consuming everything in its path. By the time any evacuation could be organized, there would be nothing left to save. The Galactic Council met in emergency session on the neutral station of Harmony Point. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Dome, their different forms and technologies creating a spectacular display of galactic diversity. But for all their combined knowledge and power, they all reached the same conclusion. "The mathematics are clear," announced Council Speaker Zareth, an ancient being whose species had been traveling the stars for millions of years. A rescue mission to that system would be suicide. The conditions exceed the tolerances of any known vessel. We must respond with humanitarian aid packages that can be delivered to safer systems, assuming the refugees can reach them. It was a reasonable response from reasonable beings. They would do what they could, within the bounds of possibility. They would not throw away lives on impossible missions, no matter how noble the cause might be. It was logical. It was practical. It was what any advanced civilization would do. Meanwhile, on a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system, humanity received the same signal. The Deep Space Monitoring Array on Earth's moon had been scanning the cosmos for decades, looking for signs of intelligent life. When the ancient distress call reached their receivers, the human scientists were excited. It was the first confirmed message from an alien civilization, and it was asking for help. Dr. Sarah Martinez led the team that decoded the message in the underground facilities beneath Luna Base. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and graying hair, but her mind was as quick as any computer. When she understood what the message was saying, she immediately called Admiral Sarah Chen at Earth Defense Command. "Admiral, we have a situation," Dr. Martinez said over the secure communication link. "We've received a distress signal from an alien species. They're facing extinction from a rogue black hole, and they need immediate assistance." Admiral Chen was in her office reviewing fleet deployment reports when the call came in. She was a tall woman with iron-gray hair, and the kind of steady presence that made people trust her in a crisis. She had fought in the Titan Wars, commanded the defense of Mars colony, and helped design humanity's most powerful warships. If anyone could evaluate this situation properly, it was her. "Send me everything you have," Admiral Chen said. "I'll convene an emergency meeting of the Defense Council." Within hours, the highest-ranking military officers and scientists on Earth gathered in the secure briefing room beneath the Pentagon. The holographic display showed the dying star system in all its terrible glory. The black hole was clearly visible, a dark wound in space surrounded by the glowing remains of planets it had already consumed. "The aliens are called the Ashkari," Dr. Martinez explained, pointing to the display. "They're a peaceful species, mostly reptilian, with a population of about 8 billion. Their homeworld is directly in the black hole's path. They have maybe 6 months before their planet is torn apart." General Harrison, the gruff commander of the Space Marines, studied the tactical display with practiced eyes. "What kind of ships do they have for evacuation?" "Primitive by our standards," Dr. Martinez replied. "Their technology is focused on peaceful purposes. Their evacuation vessels are basically converted cargo ships with life support systems. They can't handle the gravitational stress of operating near the black hole." Admiral Chen looked at the numbers scrolling across the display. The gravitational forces were enormous. The radiation levels were deadly. The time constraints were brutal. Any sane military commander would declare the mission impossible and send regrets. But Admiral Chen was not thinking like other military commanders. She was thinking like a human. "What about our Reaper-class dreadnoughts?" she asked quietly. The room fell silent. The Reaper-class ships were humanity's most controversial military project. Other species built elegant vessels designed for efficiency and grace. Humans built flying fortresses designed to absorb tremendous punishment and keep fighting. The Reapers were the ultimate expression of that philosophy. Massive, heavily armored monsters that could survive almost anything. The gravitational forces would still be extreme, warned Chief Engineer Roberts. "Even our ships would take heavy damage. But they might survive it," Admiral Chen said. "It wasn't a question. They might," Roberts admitted. "The Reapers were designed to operate in hostile environments. Their armor is thick enough to stop anti-ship missiles. Their hulls have multiple redundant systems. If any ships could survive those conditions, it would be them." General Harrison leaned forward. "How many Reapers do we have ready for deployment?" 7, Admiral Chen replied. "The Indomitable, Defiant, Relentless, Unyielding, Vengeance, Iron Fist, and Devastator, all fully crewed and equipped. That's not many ships for a rescue operation of this scale," General Harrison pointed out. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. "It's not about the number of ships, General. It's about the kind of ships, and the kind of crews that fly them." Dr. Martinez looked confused. "Admiral, I don't understand." "The other galactic civilizations have already concluded that this mission is impossible. Their technology is far more advanced than ours. If they can't do it, how can we?" Admiral Chen stood and walked to the display, studying the swirling gravity well that was devouring an entire star system. "Doctor, you're thinking like an alien. You're looking at this as a technical problem to be solved with elegant solutions and minimal risk. But that's not how humans think." She turned to face the assembled officers. "We don't build ships to be efficient. We build them to be tough. We don't plan missions to be safe. We plan them to succeed no matter the cost. And we don't abandon people just because saving them is difficult." General Harrison nodded slowly. "You're talking about a suicide mission." "I'm talking about doing what humans do best," Admiral Chen corrected. "We're talking about attempting the impossible because someone needs our help. We're talking about building something strong enough to go where others can't, and stubborn enough to keep going when any sensible being would quit." Chief Engineer Roberts was running calculations on his tablet. The Reapers could theoretically handle the gravitational stress, but the mission would push them beyond their design limits. We'd be operating with zero safety margins. "Then we better make sure our crews know what they're getting into," Admiral Chen said. "I want volunteers only. No one gets assigned to this mission. Anyone who wants to go has to choose it." Within 24 hours, Admiral Chen had her answer. Not only had every crew member of the 7 Reaper-class dreadnoughts volunteered for the mission, but thousands of other personnel had requested transfers to join them. Humanity's response to an impossible rescue mission was not to calculate the odds, but to ask who wanted to help. Captain Marcus Rodriguez commanded the lead ship, the UES Indomitable. He was a veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts. a man whose ship had been damaged so many times that his crew called him Iron Wolf for his refusal to retreat. When Admiral Chen briefed him on the mission, his only question was about the aliens they were going to save. "Tell me about the Ashkari," Captain Rodriguez said. "They're peaceful," Admiral Chen replied. "No military to speak of. Their entire civilization is built around art, science, and philosophy. They've never fought a war." Captain Rodriguez nodded. "So they're good people who need help." "That's correct. Then we'll get them out," Captain Rodriguez said simply. "Whatever it takes." As news of the mission spread through the fleet, the reaction was typically human. Instead of calculating the risks, the crews focused on the challenge. The engineers began modifying their ships for extreme conditions. The gunners practiced combat drills and high-gravity simulations. The medical teams prepared for casualties they had never seen before. The alien observers who had been monitoring human communications were baffled. The humans had received the same data as everyone else. They could see the same impossible conditions. They knew the odds of survival were minimal, and yet they were preparing to attempt the rescue anyway. On Zephyr Prime, High Scientist Veltar studied the human communications with growing confusion. "Their technology is primitive compared to ours," he told his assistants. "Their ships are crude and inefficient. How can they believe they can succeed where we cannot?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Kretal, the Zephyrian diplomat who had spent the most time studying human culture, provided a translation that went beyond words. "They are not calculating success," Ambassador Kretal explained. "They are not trying to minimize risk. They are simply deciding that someone needs help, and therefore they will provide it. The possibility of failure is irrelevant to their decision-making process." High Scientist Veltar found this concept almost impossible to understand, but that's illogical. If the mission is impossible, attempting it will only result in needless deaths. "Yes," Ambassador Kretal agreed, "but humans do not seem to consider any rescue mission to be needless regardless of the cost." As the human fleet prepared to depart Earth's solar system, messages began arriving from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council sent formal protests, claiming that the human mission would only result in additional casualties. The Corvan Empire offered to provide intelligence about the system, while secretly betting on how quickly the human ships would be destroyed. The Mindari Collective shared psychological profiles, suggesting that humans suffered from a species-wide inability to properly assess risk. Admiral Chen read all the messages and filed them away. Then she gave the order that would change humanity's relationship with the galaxy forever. "All ships prepare for jump to hyperspace. Destination, the Ashkari system. Mission parameters. Rescue every life we can, no matter the cost." The 7 Reaper-class dreadnoughts disappeared into the void, carrying crews who had volunteered to attempt the impossible. Behind them, they left a galaxy of advanced civilizations who watched with a mixture of admiration and horror as the newest species in known space set out to do what everyone else had declared could not be done. The distress call that had echoed across the galaxy was about to receive an answer, and that answer was coming from the small blue planet, whose inhabitants had never learned the meaning of the word impossible. The Reaper-class dreadnoughts were unlike any warships the galaxy had ever seen. Where other species built sleek, elegant vessels that cut through space like knives, humans built flying mountains of metal and armor. The ships were massive, brutal, and built with one simple philosophy. If something was worth doing, it was worth doing with overwhelming force. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching his crew prepare for the jump to hyperspace. The bridge was nothing like the clean, white command centers of alien vessels. It was built like a bunker, with thick armor plating covering every surface and backup systems for the backup systems. The humans had learned long ago that space was trying to kill them, so they built their ships to survive anything the universe could throw at them. "Engineering report," Captain Rodriguez called out. Chief Engineer Lisa Park looked up from her station. She was a small woman with oil-stained hands and the kind of practical intelligence that could rebuild an engine while under enemy fire. "All systems green, Captain. We've got triple redundancy on life support, double redundancy on power, and enough spare parts to rebuild half the ship if we need to." "Good," Rodriguez nodded. "What about the gravitational stress calculations?" "The computers say we'll probably survive," Park replied with a grin. Of course, the computers also said the Reapers were impossible to build in the first place. so I don't trust them completely. The Reaper-class ships were the result of human military philosophy, taken to its logical extreme. When human engineers were asked to design a battleship that could survive anything, they started with armor thick enough to stop nuclear weapons and worked from there. The ships were powered by controlled antimatter reactions that could run for decades without refueling. Their weapon systems could destroy entire cities. And most importantly, they were designed to keep fighting even when most of their systems had failed. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, the ship's tactical officer, was running final checks on the weapon systems. She was young for her rank, but she had earned her position by being the best gunner in the fleet. All weapon systems operational, Captain. We've got enough firepower to level a small moon. Let's hope we don't need it for this mission, Rodriguez said. But if we do, I'm glad we have it. The bridge crew was typical of human military personnel. They came from different backgrounds, different planets, different cultures, but they all shared the same stubborn refusal to quit when things got difficult. It was a quality that other species found both admirable and terrifying. Dr. Amanda Foster, the ship's chief medical officer, was reviewing casualty projections in her medical bay. The numbers were not encouraging. The gravitational forces they would encounter could cause everything from broken bones to internal hemorrhaging. The radiation exposure could be lethal, and if the ship's hull was breached, decompression would kill anyone not in a pressure suit. But Dr. Foster had prepared for all of it. Her medical bay was equipped with surgical robots that could operate in zero gravity, radiation shielding that could protect patients during emergency procedures, and enough medical supplies to treat the entire crew twice over. Like everything else on human ships, the medical facilities were built with massive redundancy and the expectation that they would be operating under the worst possible conditions. "Doctor, are you ready for this?" asked Nurse Jackson, a big man who had served on military ships for 20 years. "As ready as anyone can be for treating injuries that no one has ever seen before," Dr. Foster replied. "But that's what makes it interesting, right?" That was another thing that distinguished humans from other species. Where aliens saw impossible challenges as reasons to retreat, humans saw them as puzzles to solve. The more difficult the problem, the more determined they became to find a solution. In the engineering section, Chief Park was giving her team final instructions. The engineering bay of a Reaper-class ship looked like a factory designed by someone who expected to be bombed regularly. Everything was built to withstand damage and continue operating. The main reactor was surrounded by enough shielding to protect it from a direct nuclear hit. The power distribution system had so many backups that losing 90% of the ship's systems would still leave them with enough power to run life support and communications. "Remember," Park told her engineers, "these ships are designed to take damage and keep going. Don't panic if things start breaking. That's what spare parts are for. Our job is to keep this ship running no matter what the universe throws at us." Chief Petty Officer Williams, the senior engineer, raised his hand. "What if the gravitational forces are stronger than our calculations?" "Then we adapt," Park said simply. "We've got enough redundant systems to lose half the ship and still complete the mission. And if that's not enough, we'll improvise something that will work." This was the human approach to engineering. Build everything stronger than it needed to be, then add more backups just in case. It was wasteful by alien standards, but it worked. Human ships might not be the fastest or most elegant in the galaxy, but they were the hardest to kill. Meanwhile, on the other Reaper-class ships, similar preparations were taking place. Captain Jennifer Hayes of the UES Defiant was reviewing rescue protocols with her crew. Captain Michael Stone of the UES Relentless was checking the cargo holds to make sure they had enough space for refugees. Captain Elena Vasquez of the UES Unyielding was drilling her crew on emergency procedures. Each ship carried a crew of 800 highly trained personnel, and every single one of them had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might not come home. It was not because they were foolish or suicidal. It was because they were human, and humans had never learned to ignore calls for help, just because helping was dangerous. The alien observers monitoring the human fleet were struggling to understand what they were seeing. The Zephyrian intelligence analysts had studied human technology for years, trying to understand how such a primitive species could build such effective warships. "Their engineering philosophy makes no sense," reported Chief Analyst Mordek to the Zephyrian High Command. "They use 3 times as much material as necessary to build their ships, Their power systems are grossly oversized. Their weapon systems are designed for conflicts far beyond anything they have ever encountered. By all logical standards, their ships should be too expensive and complicated to build in large numbers. And yet they have built them, replied Fleet Commander Zarketh. 7 of their most powerful warships are about to attempt a mission that our best vessels could not survive. Perhaps their illogical approach has some merit we do not understand. On the war world of Corvus, General Thakran was reviewing intelligence reports about human military capabilities. The numbers were disturbing. The Reaper-class dreadnoughts were larger and more heavily armed than anything in the Corvan fleet. Worse, the humans had built them specifically for the kind of close-range, brutal combat that Corvan warriors preferred. Their ships are designed like siege engines, General Thakran told his staff. They are built to absorb enormous amounts of damage and continue fighting. In a direct confrontation, our vessels would have significant advantages in speed and maneuverability. But in a battle of endurance, these human ships would be formidable opponents. It was high praise from a species that had conquered much of their local space through military superiority. The Corvans respected strength, and they recognized it in human ship design, even if they did not understand the philosophy behind it. The Mindari Collective was analyzing human psychology to understand why they were attempting this mission. Their conclusion was that humans suffered from a species-wide cognitive disorder that prevented them from properly assessing risk. They exhibit consistent patterns of behavior that prioritize emotional responses over logical analysis, reported the Prime. Consciousness to the collective. When presented with a request for aid, they focus on the need to help rather than the probability of success. This makes them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. But some members of the collective disagreed. Perhaps, suggested a dissenting voice, what we interpret as a cognitive disorder is actually a different form of intelligence, one that values outcomes we do not consider important. As the human fleet approached the jump point to hyperspace, Captain Rodriguez received a final communication from Admiral Chen back on Earth. Iron Wolf, this is Neptune Control. You are authorized to proceed with Operation Guardian Angel. Remember, the galaxy is watching. Show them what humans can do when someone needs help. Copy that, Neptune Control. We'll bring them home. Rodriguez turned to his crew. All stations prepare for hyperspace jump. Destination, the Ashkari system. Mission, rescue everyone we can no matter what it takes. The bridge crew responded with quiet efficiency. These were professionals who had trained for years to operate the most powerful warships humanity had ever built. They knew their jobs. They trusted their equipment and they believed in their mission. Jump calculations complete, reported Navigator Thompson. Course laid in for the Ashkari system. Engineering reports ready for jump, called out Chief Park from her station. All weapon systems armed and ready, added Lieutenant Commander Kim. Medical bay prepared for casualties, reported Dr. Foster. Captain Rodriguez looked around his bridge one final time. These people had volunteered to fly into conditions that would destroy most ships in the galaxy. They had done it because someone needed help, and that was reason enough. Execute jump, Rodriguez ordered. The 7 Reaper-class dreadnoughts disappeared into hyperspace, carrying nearly 6,000 human crew members toward a rescue mission that every advanced civilization in the galaxy had declared impossible. Behind them, they left a trail of confused alien observers who could not understand why anyone would risk so much for strangers they had never met. But the humans understood. They had built their ships to be stronger than necessary because they knew the universe was dangerous. They had trained their crews to handle impossible situations because they expected to encounter them regularly. And they had volunteered for this mission because when someone called for help, humans answered. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when Earth's deadliest warships decided that impossible was just another word for challenging. And for the dying Ashkari species, hope was traveling toward them at faster than light speed, carried by the most over-engineered, over-armed, and stubbornly determined rescue fleet in galactic history. The human arsenal was not just about weapons and armor. It was about the refusal to accept defeat, the determination to help those in need, and the engineering philosophy that said if something was worth building, it was worth building strong enough to survive anything. The galaxy was about to see all of those qualities in action. The Ashkari system was dying. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of what had once been a thriving star system, And what they saw was a vision of cosmic destruction that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The rogue black hole hung in space like a wound in reality, surrounded by the glowing debris of worlds it had already consumed. Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the tactical display with grim determination. The readings were even worse than their worst-case scenarios. The gravitational forces were strong enough to bend light itself. The radiation levels would cook most known lifeforms in minutes, and somewhere in that maelstrom of destruction was a dying civilization that needed their help. "Captain," called out scanner operator Davis, her voice tight with stress, "I'm detecting multiple Ashkari vessels attempting evacuation procedures. They're in serious trouble." The main display showed the rescue situation in all its terrible complexity. The Ashkari homeworld was breaking apart, its crust cracking under gravitational stress that pulled mountains into space. Dozens of evacuation ships were fleeing the planet, but their technology was not designed for these extreme conditions. As the human crews watched, one of the alien vessels simply came apart, torn to pieces by forces beyond its ability to withstand. "How many ships do they have?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "I count 43 vessels of various sizes," Davis reported. "Biggest ones look like converted cargo haulers. They're loaded with refugees, but Captain, their ships are failing. I'm reading power fluctuations, hull stress fractures, life support failures. They won't last much longer in these conditions." Lieutenant Commander Kim was studying the tactical situation with the eye of someone trained to find solutions in impossible circumstances. "Sir, if we're going to help them, we need to get between those ships and the black hole. Use our mass to create a gravity shadow they can shelter in." It was exactly the kind of insane plan that no sane military would attempt. Flying directly into a gravity well strong enough to destroy planets was suicide by any reasonable definition, but Rodriguez was not feeling particularly reasonable at the moment. "Chief Park," he called to engineering, "can our ships handle that kind of gravitational stress?" "For a while," Park replied from her station. "The Reapers were built tough, but this is beyond anything we've ever tested. I'd guess we have maybe 6 hours before the stress fractures become critical." "Then we better work fast," Rodriguez said. "All ships, this is Iron Wolf, we're going in. Formation Delta 7, Indomitable takes point. Our job is to get between those evacuation ships and the black hole. Whatever happens, we do not leave without them." The response from the other 6 Reaper-class ships was immediate and unanimous. "Copy that, Iron Wolf. Moving to formation." As the human fleet dove toward the gravity well, the alien observers watching from safe distances could barely believe what they were seeing. The Zephyrian monitoring ship registered gravitational forces that should have crushed the human vessels instantly. The Corvin intelligence cruiser detected radiation levels that should have killed every living thing aboard those ships. The Mindari surveillance probe recorded mental emanations of calm determination that made no logical sense given the circumstances. The UES Indomitable led the way into hell. The ship's massive hull groaned under gravitational stress that bent metal and strained every joint. Armor plates that could stop nuclear weapons began to buckle and crack. But the ship held together, its redundant systems and over-engineered structure allowing it to survive where more elegant vessels would have been destroyed instantly. "Hull stress at 90% of tolerance," Chief Park reported, her hands flying over her control panels as she rerouted power around failing systems. "Forward armor sections showing stress fractures. Backup life support is online. We're still flying, Captain." On the tactical display, the situation was becoming clearer and more desperate by the minute. The Ashkari evacuation fleet was scattered across the system, some ships closer to safety than others, but all of them were failing under the extreme conditions. As Rodriguez watched, another alien vessel lost containment, its hull splitting open to vent atmosphere and lives into the void. "Communications," Rodriguez ordered. "Try to raise the Ashkari ships. Let them know help is coming." Communications Officer Martinez worked frantically to establish contact with the alien vessels. The gravitational distortion was interfering with their signals, but human communication equipment was built to work in hostile environments. "Got something, Captain," Martinez reported. "Audio only, heavily distorted, but I think I have one of their command ships. Put them through." The bridge speakers crackled with static and the unmistakable sound of beings in mortal terror. The voice that came through spoke in a language none of them understood, but the meaning was clear. They were dying, and they needed help. "Tell them we're here to help," Rodriguez ordered. Use universal mathematical sequences if you have to. Whatever it takes to let them know we're not leaving them behind. Dr. Foster's voice came over the intercom from the medical bay. Captain, I'm reading massive casualties on those alien ships. Life support failures, decompression injuries, radiation sickness. If we're going to save them, we need to get them aboard our ships as quickly as possible. It was a problem that no one had fully considered during the mission planning. The human ships were designed to carry their own crews, not thousands of alien refugees. But like everything else about this mission, they would have to improvise. Chief Park, what's our cargo capacity if we convert the shuttle bays? We could probably fit 2,000 beings per ship if we pack them in tight, Park replied. Life support can handle it for a few days. It won't be comfortable, but they'll be alive. As the UES Indomitable moved deeper into the gravity well, the ship's sensors began detecting something that changed everything. Scanner operator Davis was running deep scans of the system when she found readings that made no sense. Captain, I'm detecting artificial structures near the black hole. They're not natural formations. Rodriguez moved to the scanner station and studied the readings himself. They're barely visible against the cosmic destruction, were geometric shapes that could only be the product of intelligent design. They were massive, ancient, and clearly responsible for the black hole's unusual behavior. Those aren't asteroids, Rodriguez said quietly. They're machines. Lieutenant Commander Kim was already running tactical analysis on the new contacts. Sir, those structures are actively manipulating the black hole's gravity field. They're steering it. This isn't a natural disaster, it's an attack. The realization hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. The Ashkari were not facing a cosmic accident. They were facing a weapon system left behind by some long-dead civilization, a doomsday device designed to exterminate all life in its path. Communications, get me Admiral Chen, Rodriguez ordered. Priority Alpha. The hyperspace communication array, despite the gravitational interference, managed to establish a link with Earth. Admiral Chen's voice came through clearly, though the time delay meant this would be a brief conversation. Iron Wolf, this is Neptune Control report. Admiral, the situation has changed. The black hole is being controlled by ancient automated systems. This is not a natural disaster, it's an attack. The Ashkari are being systematically exterminated by weapons we don't understand. There was a long pause before Admiral Chen responded. Understood, Iron Wolf. Does this change your mission parameters? Captain Rodriguez looked around his bridge at the crew members who had volunteered to fly into this hell to save strangers. Their faces showed no hesitation, no doubt, no desire to retreat in the face of an even more impossible situation. Negative, Admiral. Mission parameters remain unchanged. We came here to save lives, and that's what we're going to do. Iron Wolf out. The UES Defiant was the first human ship to reach the closest Ashkari evacuation vessel. Captain Hayes maneuvered her massive dreadnought alongside the failing alien ship with a precision that would have been impressive under normal circumstances, and was miraculous under these conditions. Docking. Tube deployed, reported her executive officer. Making contact with their hull now. The first group of Ashkari refugees came aboard the UES Defiant in conditions that no one had been trained for. They were tall reptilian beings with scales that ranged from green to gold, clearly intelligent but terrified beyond the capacity for rational thought. Dr. Peterson, the ship's medical officer, had set up triage stations in the cargo bay and was treating injuries unlike anything in human medical experience. They're suffering from extreme gravitational stress, Dr. Peterson reported to Captain Hayes. Their bone structure is different from ours, more flexible, but some of them have compression fractures from the gravity gradient. I'm doing what I can, but I'm learning their physiology as I go. Similar scenes were playing out across all 7 human ships. The UES Relentless took on a group of Ashkari children, whose evacuation ship had lost life support. The UES Unyielding rescued the crew of a disabled cargo hauler, moments before it was torn apart by tidal forces. The UES Vengeance found an Ashkari research vessel that had been studying the approaching black hole and managed to save both the crew and their data. But with each rescue, the human ships were taking more damage. The UES Iron Fist lost her forward armor section to a gravitational shear that would have destroyed a lesser vessel. The UES Devastator's power plant was operating at dangerous levels, pushed beyond safe parameters to maintain position in the gravity well. Captain Rodriguez was coordinating the rescue operations from the bridge of the UES Indomitable when scanner operator Davis made another discovery that changed everything again. Captain, I'm detecting movement from those ancient structures. They're activating. On the tactical display, the massive alien machines began to move. They were huge, clearly ancient, and obviously designed for one purpose: to guide the black hole to inhabited worlds and watch them die. As the human crews watched in horror, the machines began to adjust the black hole's trajectory toward a new target. "Where are they sending it?" Rodriguez asked. Davis ran the calculations twice before she could believe the answer. "Captain, they're steering it toward the next inhabited system. There's a colony world there with about 50 million people. If the black hole reaches them..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. 50 million more beings would die, and after them millions more as the ancient weapon continued its programmed mission of galactic genocide. Lieutenant Commander Kim was studying the tactical situation with the focused intensity of someone trained to find enemy weaknesses. "Sir, those machines are old. Really old. Their technology is advanced, but their programming might be vulnerable to disruption." "What kind of disruption?" Rodriguez asked. Kim smiled grimly. "The kind that involves flying a Reaper-class dreadnought directly into their control center and detonating our antimatter warheads." It was not a plan that offered much chance of survival. The ancient machines were protected by the same gravitational forces that had already damaged the human ships. Getting close enough to attack them would require flying even deeper into the gravity well, into conditions that would test the Reapers beyond their design limits. But Rodriguez was looking at the tactical display, where 43 Ashkari evacuation ships were struggling to escape a cosmic horror that would follow them no matter where they ran. And beyond that, 50 million more beings who had no idea that death was coming for them. "All ships, this is Iron Wolf," Rodriguez said calmly. "We have a new mission objective. Those ancient machines are steering the black hole toward other inhabited systems. We're going to stop them." The response from the other 6 Reaper captains was immediate and unanimous. They had come here to save lives, and that mission had just gotten bigger. The human fleet, already damaged from their rescue operations, began to form up for an attack run against weapons that had been destroying civilizations when humanity was still learning to use stone tools. It was not a fight they were likely to win, but it was a fight that needed fighting. And as any alien observer could have told them, humans had never been very good at knowing when to quit. The ancient machines had been waiting in the dark between stars for millions of years. They were the last weapons of a civilization so old that their creators had turned to dust before the first human had looked up at the night sky. Built to destroy all organic life in the galaxy, they had been methodically hunting down inhabited worlds one by one, using black holes as their tools of extinction. They had never encountered anything like the 7 human warships that were now accelerating directly toward them. Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the tactical display as his fleet formed up for the most desperate attack in human history. The ancient weapon platforms were massive, each one larger than a human city, protected by energy fields that bent space itself. Getting close enough to damage them would require flying through gravitational forces that had already pushed the Reaper-class ships to their breaking point. "All ships, battle stations," Rodriguez ordered. "We're going in fast and hard. Chief Park, give me everything the reactors have. I don't care if we burn them out. We won't need them if we fail." In the engineering section, Chief Park and her team were pushing the ship's antimatter reactor beyond every safety parameter. The containment fields were fluctuating, the power conduits were glowing white-hot, and alarms were sounding throughout the ship. But the engines were producing more power than they had ever been designed to handle. "Captain," Park's voice came over the intercom, "we're operating at 130% of maximum safe power. The reactor will hold together for maybe 20 minutes at these levels." "That's all we need," Rodriguez replied. 20 minutes to save 50 million lives. Lieutenant Commander Kim was coordinating target assignments across the fleet. The ancient machines had multiple control nodes, each one protected by defensive systems that had destroyed countless civilizations over the millennia. But they had a weakness that their builders had never anticipated. They had been designed to fight conventional warfare. "Target Alpha is the central control node," Kim announced to the fleet. "It's the biggest and most heavily defended, but if we can take it out, the whole system should shut down. Indomitable and Defiant will take the main approach. Relentless and Unyielding will hit the secondary targets. Vengeance, Iron Fist, and Devastator will provide covering fire. It was not a complex plan, because complex plans did not survive contact with reality. The human strategy was simple. Get close enough to hurt the enemy, then hit them with everything they had. Dr. Foster was preparing the medical bay for casualties that she might never have the chance to treat. The attack run would take the ships into conditions that could kill everyone aboard instantly. But she had trained for impossible situations, and this was just another day at the Office for Humanity's Military Medical Corps. All medical personnel to emergency stations, she announced over the ship's intercom. Prepare for maximum casualties. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and keep working until the job is done. The UES Indomitable led the charge into the gravity well, her massive bulk absorbing punishment that would have destroyed any other vessel in the galaxy. Armor plates cracked and split away, spinning off into the void like metallic snow. Hull breaches appeared and were sealed by emergency systems. Power conduits failed and were bypassed by backup circuits. But the ship kept flying. Forward armor sections completely gone, Chief Park reported, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. We're losing structural integrity in sections 7 through 12. Switching to emergency power routing. We're still in the fight, Captain. On the bridge, scanner operator Davis was tracking the enemy defenses with the focused intensity of someone who knew that missing a single detail could get everyone killed. Captain, the ancient machines are powering up their weapons. I'm reading energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. The first enemy attack came as beams of pure gravitational force that tried to tear the human ships apart at the molecular level. The UES Defiant took a direct hit that should have scattered her atoms across half the system. Instead, her hull buckled and twisted, her superstructure bent like a pretzel, but her essential systems remained intact. Captain Hayes, bleeding from a head wound caused by debris from her own bridge, continued giving orders as her ship absorbed punishment that would have destroyed a dozen normal vessels. Engineering, reroute power to forward shields. Weapons, target the nearest defensive platform. All crew, damage control teams to emergency stations. The UES Relentless, attacking from a different angle, lost her entire forward section to a weapon that simply made matter cease to exist. But Captain Stone had built his career on refusing to admit defeat, and his ship continued the attack run with half her hull missing, and her crew wearing emergency pressure suits. We're still flying, Stone reported to Rodriguez. Hull breach in sections 1 through 4, but we've sealed the rest. Weapon systems are operational. Continuing attack, it was insanity by any rational standard. The human ships were being systematically destroyed by weapons beyond their understanding, and they were continuing to attack anyway. But that was what humans did when someone needed their help. They kept going until the job was done, or there was nothing left of them to continue. The ancient machines were learning something that millions of years of galactic conquest had never taught them. Some species could not be intimidated by impossible odds. Captain Rodriguez brought the UES Indomitable close enough to the central control node to see individual details on its surface. The alien structure was covered in symbols that might have been writing, or might have been art created by beings whose thoughts were utterly unlike any form of life that still existed. It was beautiful in its own terrible way, and it had been murdering civilizations since before humans had learned to use fire. Lieutenant Commander Kim, Rodriguez said calmly, prepare the antimatter warheads. We're going to ram that thing. It was the ultimate expression of human military philosophy. If something needed to be destroyed, and you could not destroy it safely, then you destroyed it unsafely. The UES Indomitable, already crippled by the enemy defenses, became a guided missile weighing several million tons and carrying enough antimatter to level a continent. All hands, brace for impact, Rodriguez announced over the ship's intercom. It's been an honor serving with you. The collision between the UES Indomitable and the ancient control node released enough energy to briefly outshine the system's dying star. The human dreadnought's armor, designed to withstand nuclear weapons, held together just long enough for the antimatter warheads to penetrate deep into the alien structure before detonating. The explosion tore the control node apart from the inside, its ancient technology finally succumbing to the simple human solution of applying overwhelming force to critical components. Secondary explosions rippled through the machine as systems that had operated for millions of years finally failed. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The UES Indomitable was gone, Her crew of 800 vaporized in an instant of nuclear fire. Captain Rodriguez and his people had paid the ultimate price to save beings they had never met on worlds they would never see. The other human ships continued the attack with the grim determination of people who had just watched their friends die for a cause bigger than themselves. The UES Defiant, her hull twisted into a barely recognizable shape, managed to plant her remaining antimatter warheads inside a secondary control node before her reactor finally failed. The UES Relentless, flying with half her structure missing, used her last functional weapons to destroy the targeting systems that guided the black hole's path. One by one, the ancient machines were silenced, not through elegant tactics or superior technology, but through the simple application of human stubbornness and the willingness to pay any price to protect innocent life. The UES Vengeance was the last human ship to survive the battle intact. Captain Torres brought her vessel close enough to the final machine to confirm what their sensors were telling them. The ancient weapons system was shutting down. Without its control nodes, the black hole was no longer being guided toward inhabited worlds. It would continue to exist, but it would follow natural gravitational laws instead of artificial commands to commit genocide. "All stations, this is Vengeance," Torres announced to what remained of the human fleet. "Enemy systems are powering down. The black hole has resumed natural trajectory. Mission accomplished." The cost had been enormous. 4 of the 7 Reaper-class dreadnoughts were gone, their crews lost in the battle against weapons that had destroyed countless civilizations. The 3 surviving ships were so damaged that it was a miracle they were still spaceworthy. Out of nearly 6,000 human crew members who had entered the system, fewer than 2,000 remained alive. But they had succeeded. The ancient genocide machines were silent. The black hole would not destroy any more inhabited worlds, and scattered throughout the surviving human ships were nearly 8,000 Ashkari refugees who were alive because humans had decided that someone needed help. Dr. Foster was treating injuries in the medical bay of the UES Vengeance when the first Ashkari delegation approached her. They were tall reptilian beings with intelligent eyes and a dignity that had survived even the destruction of their world. One of them, who seemed to be some kind of leader, spoke in heavily accented but understandable human language. "Doctor," the Ashkari said, "my people wish to know why your species did this. Why did you sacrifice so much for strangers you had never met?" Dr. Foster looked up from the patient she was treating, a human engineer who had suffered radiation poisoning while keeping his ship's reactor online during the battle. Around them, human and Ashkari personnel were working together to care for the wounded, despite having no common language beyond mathematics and the universal understanding of compassion. "Because that's what we do," she said simply. "When someone calls for help, humans answer. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. If you need help, we'll do whatever it takes to give it to you." The Ashkari leader studied her for a long moment, trying to understand a philosophy that seemed to make no logical sense. "But the cost? Your people died for us, thousands of them. How can any cause be worth such sacrifice?" Dr. Foster continued working on her patient as she replied, "Because every life has value. Because no one should die alone and afraid if we can prevent it. Because the universe is big and cold and hostile, and the only thing that makes it bearable is knowing that someone will come for you when you need them." She looked up at the Ashkari leader, her eyes tired but determined. "Your people were calling for help. We heard you, so we came. That's all the reason we needed." The alien observer ships that had been monitoring the battle from safe distances were struggling to process what they had witnessed. The humans had lost more than half their fleet, suffered thousands of casualties, and bankrupted themselves both militarily and economically for the sake of saving a species they had never met. By any rational calculation, it had been a wasteful and foolish gesture that had weakened humanity's position in the galaxy. But as the alien observers watched the human survivors working tirelessly to care for their rescued refugees, they began to understand that they were witnessing something that their advanced civilizations had lost: the willingness to sacrifice everything for the simple principle that life was worth protecting. The humans had done what advanced aliens had declared impossible. They had saved the Ashkari. They had stopped the ancient genocide machines. And they had done it by applying the most human solution imaginable. They had built their ships stronger than necessary, trained their crews to fight in impossible conditions, and then refused to quit when any sensible being would have retreated. It was inefficient. It was wasteful. It was completely illogical by the standards of advanced galactic civilizations, and it had worked. 6 months after the Battle of the Ashkari system, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the neutral station of Harmony Point. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Great Dome. But for the first time in recorded history, the discussions were not about trade routes or territorial disputes. They were about humanity and what their actions meant for the future of galactic civilization. The Ashkari delegation sat in the place of honor, their tall reptilian forms draped in ceremonial robes that told the story of their people's salvation. Their new homeworld was still being terraformed, but they were alive, and their culture would survive to see another millennium. 8,000 of their people owed their existence to humans who had died to save them. Ambassador Cathara, the senior Ashkari representative, rose to address the council. Her voice carried across the Great Dome with the weight of someone who had watched her world die and her people reborn. "Honored delegates," she began, "my people come before you today not to seek aid or arbitration, but to bear witness to something we have never seen before in this galaxy. We have encountered a species that measures success not by what they gain, but by what they preserve. The humans of Earth answered our call when we faced extinction, and they did so knowing that many of them would not return home." She gestured to a holographic display that showed the wreckage of the human fleet after the battle. The images were stark and terrible. Massive warships torn apart by forces beyond imagination, their crews scattered across the void in the cause of saving strangers. They lost 4 of their 7 most powerful vessels. They suffered over 3,000 casualties. They exhausted their military reserves and damaged their defensive capabilities for a generation. And when we asked them why they did this for people they had never met, they tell us that someone called for help, and humans answer such calls. The council chamber was silent as Ambassador Cathara continued. "We have lived in this galaxy for millions of years, trading with dozens of species, learning from advanced civilizations that span star systems. But we have never encountered anything like human compassion. And we believe the galaxy has not encountered anything like human sacrifice." Council Speaker Zareth, the ancient being who had presided over galactic affairs for centuries, listened with the careful attention of someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall. When the Ashkari finished their testimony, he turned to address the other delegates. "The human actions in the Ashkari system have created complications," he said carefully. "Their methods were crude, their losses were excessive, and their approach violated numerous principles of efficient resource management. However, their results speak for themselves." High Scientist Veltar of the Zephyrians requested permission to speak. His blue-skinned form was tense with the kind of confusion that came from encountering something that challenged fundamental assumptions. "Honored Speaker, we have analyzed human technology and tactics extensively. By all logical measures, their approach to the rescue mission was inefficient and wasteful. Their ships are over-engineered, their crews are overtrained, and their willingness to accept casualties is beyond our understanding." He paused, clearly struggling with his next words. "However, we must acknowledge that they succeeded where our superior technology would have failed. Their crude methods produced results that our elegant solutions could not achieve. This suggests that there are aspects of problem-solving that our civilization has not fully explored." General Thakran of the Corvan Empire stood to address the assembly. His massive form and battle-scarred armor commanded attention from delegates who had learned to respect Corvan military judgment. "The humans fight like Corvans," he said simply. "They do not calculate odds before battle. They do not retreat when victory becomes costly. They build their ships to absorb damage that would destroy lesser vessels. And they train their warriors to continue fighting when others would surrender." He looked around the chamber with eyes that had seen 100 battles. "My people have conquered much of our local space through military superiority. But these humans, they built ships that could defeat our entire fleet, and they used them to save refugees instead of conquering territory. We do not understand this choice, but we respect the strength that made it possible." The prime consciousness of the Mindari collective projected its thoughts directly into the minds of the assembled delegates. The mental communication carried undertones of confusion and reluctant admiration. "We have analyzed human psychological patterns and found consistent deviations from optimal decision-making processes. They prioritize emotional responses over logical calculations. They accept risks that exceed potential benefits. They expend resources on projects with minimal probability of success." The mental voice paused, carrying a note of something that might have been wonder. Yet they consistently achieve outcomes that our logical processes declare impossible. We are forced to conclude that human irrationality may actually represent a form of intelligence that operates by principles we do not fully understand. Ambassador Torres from the human delegation sat quietly throughout the testimony. She was a small woman with graying hair and the kind of steady presence that came from years of diplomatic service. When Council Speaker Zareth finally recognized her, she rose to address the assembly with calm dignity. Honored delegates, Ambassador Torres began, I have listened to your analysis of human actions with great interest. You describe our methods as crude, our tactics as wasteful, and our psychology as flawed. You are probably correct by the standards of your respective civilizations. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from species that had existed when humanity was still learning to use stone tools. But you missed the fundamental point. We did not answer the Ashkari distress call because it was efficient or profitable or logical. We answered because someone needed help, and that is reason enough. The chamber stirred as delegates processed this simple statement. Ambassador Torres continued, her voice carrying the weight of conviction. You speak of our losses as if they were failures. 4 ships destroyed, 3,000 casualties, massive expenditure of resources, but we do not measure success by what we preserve. We measure it by what we accomplish. 8,000 Ashkari are alive today who would have died without our intervention. Ancient genocide machines have been silenced that would have continued murdering civilizations for millions of years. That is not failure by human standards. That is victory. Council Speaker Zareth leaned forward in his chair. Ambassador Torres, your species has demonstrated remarkable capabilities but also remarkable recklessness. The galaxy operates on principles of calculated risk and measured response. Your approach to problem-solving appears to ignore these principles entirely. You're correct, Torres replied without hesitation. We do ignore those principles when someone needs our help. We built our ships to be stronger than necessary because we expected to need that strength. We trained our crews to fight in impossible conditions because we expected to face impossible conditions. And we succeeded where your advanced civilizations failed because we were prepared to pay prices that you would not pay. She gestured to the holographic display still showing the aftermath of the battle. You call our losses excessive. We call them the cost of doing what was necessary. The difference is that we were willing to pay that cost. General Thakran nodded approvingly, spoken like a true warrior. But Ambassador, your people have weakened themselves significantly with this gesture. How will you defend your own worlds if you exhaust your military resources saving strangers? Torres smiled grimly. General, you're thinking like someone who has never seen human shipyards in full production. Those 4 Reaper-class dreadnoughts we lost, we're building 12 more to replace them, and the new ones are bigger, stronger, and better armed than their predecessors. The statement sent ripples of surprise through the chamber. High Scientist Veltar was the first to respond. Ambassador, our intelligence indicates that the construction of even 1 Reaper-class vessel requires enormous resources. How can your people possibly afford to build 12 of them? Because, Torres replied, the galaxy has seen what human ships can do when someone needs our help. Orders are pouring in from species that want our protection. Trade agreements from civilizations that want our technology. Defense contracts from governments that have decided they want humanity as an ally rather than a potential enemy. She looked directly at the Zephyrian scientist. Our wasteful gesture of saving the Ashkari has made humanity the most sought-after military ally in the galaxy. The economic benefits of our reputation for reliability far exceed the cost of our rescue mission. Council Speaker Zareth was silent for a long moment, processing implications that none of them had fully considered. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. Ambassador Torres, are you suggesting that your people undertook this mission with the expectation of economic benefit? Not at all, Torres replied immediately. We undertook this mission because people were dying and we could help them. The economic benefits are just a consequence of having a reputation for doing the right thing when it matters. She stood straighter, addressing the entire assembly. Honored delegates, you have analyzed our methods and found them wanting by your standards. You have calculated our losses and declared them excessive. You have studied our psychology and declared it flawed, but you have missed the most important point of all. The chamber fell silent as Torres continued. We are the species that answers distress calls. We are the civilization that builds ships strong enough to go where others cannot. We are the people who measure victory by lives saved rather than resources preserved. And now, every being in this galaxy knows that if they are in trouble, if they are facing extinction, if they need help that no one else will provide, they can call Earth and we will come. The silence that followed her words was profound. Around the chamber, delegates from ancient civilizations were grappling with concepts that challenged their fundamental assumptions about rational behavior and optimal resource allocation. Ambassador Cathara of the Ashkari spoke into the silence. Honored delegates, I have one final testimony to offer. When the ancient machines were destroyed and the immediate threat ended, we expected the humans to depart immediately. Their ships were damaged, their crews were exhausted, and they had accomplished their mission. Her voice carried a note of wonder that had not dimmed in the 6 months since the rescue. Instead, they remained in our system for 3 weeks. They helped us organize evacuation procedures, shared their medical technology to treat our wounded, and provided engineering assistance to repair our damaged ships. They did not leave until every one of our people was safe and our evacuation fleet was capable of reaching our new homeworld. She looked around the chamber with eyes that had seen her species' darkest hour and their salvation. This is what humans call following through. They do not simply answer calls for help. They ensure that their help is sufficient and lasting. Council Speaker Zareth stood slowly, his ancient form reflecting the weight of decisions that would reshape galactic civilization. When he spoke, his words carried the authority of millennia of leadership. The human actions in the Ashkari system have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our previous assessments. Their methods may be unorthodox, but their results are undeniable. Therefore, this council extends a formal invitation to the human government to join the Galactic Defense Initiative, not as junior partners or auxiliary forces, but as primary strategic advisors. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs as delegates processed the implications. Never before had a species so new to galactic civilization been offered such a position of authority. Furthermore, Zareth continued, we request that human military advisors assist in developing new protocols for emergency response to existential threats. Recent intelligence suggests that the ancient machines destroyed in the Ashkari system were not unique. Similar weapons may exist throughout the galaxy, dormant but potentially active. General Thakran stood to address the assembly. The Corvan Empire seconds this motion. We have analyzed the battle records from the Ashkari system and concluded that conventional military tactics would be ineffective against such weapons. Human approaches to warfare may represent our best defense against threats we do not fully understand. High Scientist Veltar reluctantly agreed. The Zephyrian Collective supports the proposal. Human engineering philosophy appears to produce results that our more elegant approaches cannot achieve. We believe there is much we can learn from their methods. Even the Mindari Collective projected agreement. Human problem-solving processes operate by principles that complement our own. Cooperation between our civilizations may produce solutions that neither could achieve alone. Ambassador Torres listened to the offers and proposals with careful attention. When the chamber finally quieted, she stood to respond. On behalf of the human government, I accept the Council's invitation to join the Galactic Defense Initiative. We will provide military advisors, share our technology, and assist in developing protocols for emergency response. But I want to be clear about our terms. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings whose civilizations spanned millennia. We will help because that is what humans do. But we will do it our way, using our methods according to our principles. We will build ships stronger than necessary, train crews to fight in impossible conditions, and accept missions that others declare impossible. We will measure success by lives saved rather than resources preserved. The smile that crossed her face was the same one that Admiral Chen had worn when she decided to send humanity's most powerful warships to answer a call for help from strangers. And when the next impossible situation arises, when the next species faces extinction, when the next call for help echoes across the galaxy, Earth will answer. That is what we do. That is who we are. And now, the galaxy knows it. In the months that followed, construction began on the Olympus-class super dreadnoughts, ships that made the Reaper-class vessels look like escorts. Human shipyards operated around the clock, building not just for Earth but for allies across the galaxy who had decided they wanted human protection. The original distress call that had echoed across the galaxy had been answered, but its echo continued to spread. Now it carried a different message. No matter how impossible the situation, no matter how overwhelming the odds, no matter how great the sacrifice required, if someone called for help, the humans would come, and they would bring their over-engineered, over-armed, stubbornly determined warships with them. She looked directly at the Zephyrian scientist. Our wasteful gesture of saving the Ashkari has made humanity the most sought-after military ally in the galaxy. The economic benefits of our reputation for reliability far exceed the cost of our rescue mission. Council Speaker Zareth was silent for a long moment, processing implications that none of them had fully considered. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. Ambassador Torres, are you suggesting that your people undertook this mission with the expectation of economic benefit? Not at all, Torres replied immediately. We undertook this mission because people were dying and we could help them. The economic benefits are just a consequence of having a reputation for doing the right thing when it matters. She stood straighter, addressing the entire assembly. Honored delegates, you have analyzed our methods and found them wanting by your standards. You have calculated our losses and declared them excessive. You have studied our psychology and declared it flawed. But you have missed the most important point of all. The chamber fell silent as Torres continued. We are the species that answers distress calls. We are the civilization that builds ships strong enough to go where others cannot. We are the people who measure victory by lives saved, rather than resources preserved. And now every being in this galaxy knows that if they are in trouble, if they are facing extinction, if they need help that no one else will provide, they can call Earth and we will come. The silence that followed her words was profound. Around the chamber, delegates from ancient civilizations were grappling with concepts that challenged their fundamental assumptions about rational behavior and optimal resource allocation. Ambassador Kethara of the Ashkari spoke into the silence. Honored delegates, I have one final testimony to offer. When the ancient machines were destroyed and the immediate threat ended, we expected the humans to depart immediately. Their ships were damaged, their crews were exhausted, and they had accomplished their mission. Her voice carried a note of wonder that had not dimmed in the 6 months since the rescue. Instead, they remained in our system for 3 weeks. They helped us organize evacuation procedures, shared their medical technology to treat our wounded, and provided engineering assistance to repair our damaged ships. They did not leave until every one of our people was safe and our evacuation fleet was capable of reaching our new homeworld. She looked around the chamber with eyes that had seen her species' darkest hour and their salvation. This is what humans call following through. They do not simply answer calls for help. They ensure that their help is sufficient and lasting. Council Speaker Zareth stood slowly, his ancient form reflecting the weight of decisions that would reshape galactic civilization. When he spoke, his words carried the authority of millennia of leadership. The human actions in the Ashkari system have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our previous assessments. Their methods may be unorthodox, but their results are undeniable. Therefore, this council extends a formal invitation to the human government to join the Galactic Defense Initiative, not as junior partners or auxiliary forces, but as primary strategic advisors. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs as delegates processed the implications. Never before had a species so new to galactic civilization been offered such a position of authority. Furthermore, Zareth continued, we request that human military advisors assist in developing new protocols for emergency response to existential threats. Recent intelligence suggests that the ancient machines destroyed in the Ashkari system were not unique. Similar weapons may exist throughout the galaxy, dormant but potentially active. General Thakren stood to address the assembly. The Corvan Empire seconds this motion. We have analyzed the battle records from the Ashkari system and concluded that conventional military tactics would be ineffective against such weapons. Human approaches to warfare may represent our best defense against threats we do not fully understand. High Scientist Veltar reluctantly agreed. The Zephyrian Collective supports the proposal. Human engineering philosophy appears to produce results that our more elegant approaches cannot achieve. We believe there is much we can learn from their methods. Even the Mindari Collective projected agreement. Human problem-solving processes operate by principles that complement our own. Cooperation between our civilizations may produce solutions that neither could achieve alone. Ambassador Torres listened to the offers and proposals with careful attention. When the chamber finally quieted, she stood to respond. On behalf of the human government, I accept the Council's invitation to join the Galactic Defense Initiative. We will provide military advisors, share our technology, and assist in developing protocols for emergency response. But I want to be clear about our terms." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings whose civilizations spanned millennia. "We will help because that is what humans do. But we will do it our way, using our methods according to our principles. We will build ships stronger than necessary, train crews to fight in impossible conditions and accept missions that others declare impossible. We will measure success by lives saved rather than resources preserved." The smile that crossed her face was the same one that Admiral Chen had worn when she decided to send humanity's most powerful warships to answer a call for help from strangers. And when the next impossible situation arises, when the next species faces extinction, when the next call for help echoes across the galaxy, Earth will answer. That is what we do. That is who we are, and now the galaxy knows it. In the months that followed, construction began on the Olympus-class super dreadnoughts, ships that made the Reaper-class vessels look like escorts. Human shipyards operated around the clock, building not just for Earth but for allies across the galaxy who had decided they wanted human protection. The original distress call that had echoed across the galaxy had been answered, but its echo continued to spread. Now it carried a different message. No matter how impossible the situation, no matter how overwhelming the odds, no matter how great the sacrifice required, if someone called for help, the humans would come, and they would bring their over-engineered, over-armed, stubbornly determined warships with them.